The last thing I remembered was the screech of tires, a blinding light, and the sickening crunch of my own bones. A pain sharp and deep, not just from the impact but from a lifetime of regrets, sharper than any metal shard. My life hadn't flashed before my eyes. It had oozed out, a gray, monotonous film of sacrifice and silence. A life lived for two men who never truly saw me. When my mind cleared, the scent of machine oil and cheap thread filled my nostrils. My hands, which should have been broken and old, were young and calloused, gripping a needle. I was sitting on a hard wooden stool in the bustling, noisy workshop of the Xiangjiang garment factory. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, and the whirring of a dozen sewing machines was a familiar, hated symphony. My hand trembled. I dropped the needle. It was 1979. I was 18 years old again. Alara Vance was reborn. A coworker next to me, Lynn, nudged my shoulder. Alara? The floor manager said no bathroom breaks. They'll dock your pay. I looked at her, really looked at her. Her face was unlined, full of a simple exhaustion I no longer shared. The resentment I had carried for decades, the knowledge of what was to come, crystallized into a single unwavering point of resolve. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the concrete floor. I'm quitting, I said, my voice clear and loud, cutting through the rhythmic clatter of the machines. Every gaze in the workshop landed on me. Whispers broke out. The floor manager, a stern woman named Mrs. Wong, started marching toward me, her face like thunder. Girl, have you lost your mind? Lynn hissed. Jobs are hard to come by. What about your boyfriend's repeat year? Who will support him? A cold, sharp smile touched my lips. Boyfriend. The word was ash in my mouth. Kalen Mercer. The Phoenix man. The man for whom I had burned my own future to cinders so his could shine. I'm going to take the college entrance exam, I announced, my voice ringing with a certainty that stunned even me. As for Kalen's tuition and living expenses, he can figure them out himself. I didn't wait for a response. I unclipped my work badge, let it fall to the table. I shrugged off the drab, coarse uniform, standing there in my simple cotton clothes. I walked out of that factory, away from the life of drudgery, without a single backward glance. The afternoon sun, weak and pale through the city smog, had never felt so warm on my skin. Kalen and I were both orphans, raised in the same state-run children's home. He was the lucky one, adopted by a kind, elderly man who lived alone. We grew up together, two scrappy kids clinging to each other for warmth. When we were 16, hearts stirring with promises we didn't understand, we vowed to get into Tsinghua University together. He was brilliant, the star of our school. I was merely diligent. He failed the exam. When he decided to repeat the year, his adoptive father was diagnosed with severe dementia. The weight of the world fell on his slender shoulders. And I, like the fool I was, made the decision that would define my ruin. I had my admission notice to Tsinghua in my hand, a flimsy piece of paper that was my ticket to another life, and I gave it up. I willingly stayed in our provincial city, entered the factory, and told him I would fund his studies. Back then, Kalen had held me, his eyes red-rimmed. I'll work so hard, Alara. I'll get into Tsinghua, and then I'll work day and night to earn money so you can sit for the exam again. I promise. I had nestled in his arms, my heart so full of love and stupid hope, and I believed every word. In the summer of 1980 he succeeded. He got into Tsinghua. But his studies were demanding, he said. There was no one to care for his ailing father, he said. I was all the old man had left, he said. He promised that once his father passed he would be right by my side when I took the exam. So I waited. I waited until 1984. The old man died. Kalen graduated. I moved to Beijing, my heart fluttering with a nervous, long-deferred joy, ready to finally begin. And then I got pregnant. Kalen wanted me to have the baby. A woman should have children, he'd said, his tone leaving no room for argument. It won't be too late to take the exam afterward. The pregnancy was difficult, the symptoms relentless. I compromised. In 1986 I gave birth to our son. After that, the exam was a forgotten dream. My son was my whole world. Hungry, he wanted me. Crying, he wanted me. Sick, he wanted only me. I finally reached the Beijing I'd longed for at 25. Only to be tied down by my child until I was 30. I compromised again and again until he married and gave me a grandson. And still I was never free. Half my life was nothing but Kalen talking or our son talking. No one ever listened to me. Just as I was trying to comfort myself, to accept the quiet despair of my status quo, I found it. Kalen's diary. He had always guarded it fiercely, calling it private. For years I never dared to touch it. But that day, a gnawing intuition made me open it. Hundreds of entries. And every one was about his love for another woman. Serafina Dove. It turned out his failure back then wasn't an accident. It was a deliberate, calculated gambit. When Serafina decided to repeat a year, Kalen Mercer, the brilliant student, deliberately filled in wrong answers so he could stay by her side. When she complained about the cafeteria food, he brought her expensive fruit cakes. When she felt cold, he skipped class to buy her a scarf and gloves made of Angora wool. And all that money came from me. Every stitch I embroidered, every coin I saved from my meager factory wages, had been funneled into his courtship of another woman. My whole body trembled with a rage so profound it felt like a physical illness. I confronted him, the diary shaking in my hand. Since you've been in love with someone else all this time, why did you even marry me? He snatched the diary from me, his eyes cold and distant. Who said you could read my diary? You're just a housewife who's never even been to college. Can you even read all the words in it? Don't assume everyone's as filthy-minded as you are. I stood there frozen. If not for him, how could I have missed my chance at college? And now he despised me for being uneducated? The man who once looked at me as if I were his whole world was gone, replaced by this callous stranger. I no longer argued. The fight had gone out of me, replaced by a crushing emptiness. I picked up a small suitcase and left. My son tried to follow, but Kalen stopped him. This house is mine. She doesn't have anywhere else to go. She'll be back in a few days. Just as he predicted, my son didn't come after me. The disappointment was a final, suffocating weight. Dazed, I walked straight into the path of an oncoming car. Now sitting in my small rented room, the memory of that betrayal was as fresh as yesterday. I clenched my jaw until it ached. The second chance was a gift from heaven and I would not waste it. I was Alara Vance and I would live for myself this time. I spent the evening in a fever of activity, setting up a study plan, allocating my meager savings. I was so engrossed I didn't hear the key turn in the lock. The door opened and two people walked in. As expected, one was Kalen, tall and handsome in his clean-cut way. But the person behind him made my blood run cold. It was Serafina Dove. Kalen clearly hadn't expected me. I should have been working the night shift. Panic flashed in his eyes. Alara, what are you doing back? Before I could answer, Serafina shivered dramatically from the cold. It's freezing out there, she whined, her voice like tinkling bells. Kalen immediately forgot about me, pulling her inside. This is Serafina Dove, the class president of my repeat year program, he said as if introducing a dignitary. Serafina was everything I was not. Her skin was porcelain, her eyes large and luminous. She wore a stylish, well-tailored jacket that screamed of money and confidence. When she noticed me staring, she offered a sweet, condescending smile. Hello, sister. Before I could muster a reply, she walked straight into my bathroom as if she owned the place. Seeing my stony silence, Kalen explained with infuriating nonchalance. Her dorm is too noisy. It's bad for studying. I decided to let her stay here for a while. His self-righteous tone made the anger I had been suppressing flare to life. He had insisted I rent this apartment so he could visit me, making my financial burden heavier, and I had agreed, thrilled at the prospect of seeing him. Now I saw its true purpose. When I stayed silent, he added, next time let me know before you come back. Otherwise, the bed's too small and she'll be uncomfortable. He busied himself making up a bed on the floor, then placed my own pajamas outside the bathroom door for her, acting like the rightful master of the domain I paid for. I watched him, a cold stillness settling over me. I walked to the kitchen, filled a basin with scalding hot water and returned. Without a word, I dumped the entire basin over him and the makeshift bed he was so tenderly preparing for his mistress. The water soaked through the blankets with a hiss, steam rising in the damp, cold air. Kalen yelped, jumping up instantly, his clothes soaked, his face a mask of shock and growing fury. What the hell are you doing? He roared. I looked him dead in the eye, my voice devoid of all emotion. Washing the filth away. He was about to explode when the bathroom door opened and Serafina stepped out, wrapped in a towel, her hair damp. She looked at the soaked mess on the floor, her lips forming a perfect O of surprise. Kalen, what happened here? Instantly, Kaylin's anger vanished, replaced by a forced, placating smile. It's nothing. Elara accidentally spilled water on the bedding. I didn't let him get away with it. My voice was steady, a ripple on a frozen lake. I never said it was an accident. I did it on purpose. Kaylin's brows knitted together, his tone a low warning. Elara Vance, have you been working so much you've lost your mind? What nonsense are you talking about? He turned back to Serafina, his eyes soft. Your pajamas are thin. Be careful not to catch a chill. Go get some rest. Serafina's gaze flickered from Kaylin to me, her whole demeanor shifting to one of wounded innocence. Sister, she said, her voice trembling slightly, the bedding's all wet. Kaylin doesn't have a place to sleep. I'll just go back to my dorm and squeeze in with my classmates. I don't want to trouble you. She made a show of turning to leave. But Kaylin grabbed her arm. It's not safe for a girl to go back this late at night. You stay here. He turned to me, his jaw set. I'll go back to the factory with Elara and make do for one night. Serafina's eyes welled up with real tears, her voice choked. Forget it, Kaylin. Your wife doesn't welcome me. Can tell. I just won't come again. Kaylin grew frantic. He grabbed my wrist, his grip like a vice. You're being unreasonable. You stay here. I'll leave with her right now. I yanked my hand free, the dam of my resentment finally breaking. Kaylin Mercer, this is my rented apartment. How can you be so shameless? He froze, stunned by my venom. Elara, what's yours and mine? Why are you drawing lines between us? A cold, mirthless laugh escaped me. Don't call me Elara. Call me Mom. After all, I fed you, clothed you, paid for your repeat year, and now I'm even funding you to find another woman. What's the difference between you and a son? His face flushed a deep, mortified red. Elara Vance, the money you've spent on me, I'll pay you back someday. Do you really have to be like this? The sound of the slap echoed through the small room, crisp and satisfying. I had struck him hard across the face with all the strength of 2 lifetimes of rage. He stared at me wide-eyed, completely and utterly stunned. The mark of my hand bloomed red on his cheek. Serafina jumped in front of him, her tone full of theatrical reproach. How can you hit someone like that? You're acting like a complete shrew. I lowered my aching left hand, then raised my right and slapped her just as hard. The sound was equally sharp. A mother has every right to discipline her son, I said coolly. And you, an outsider, what right do you have to butt in? Serafina clutched her face, tears spilling over in earnest now. Kaylin immediately pulled her behind him, his own face a thundercloud. Elara Vance, you've truly lost your mind. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, shoving it into his chest. Sign it. He frowned, picking it up. As he read it, the last vestiges of his false composure slipped away. It was an IOU. I had listed every penny I had spent on him since he started his repeat year. I glanced at him, my expression icy. The money I've spent on you lately, you're going to pay it back. I'll only feel at ease with your signature on it. He gripped the paper, his knuckles white as if he couldn't believe I was serious. Serafina, seeing his hesitation, snatched it from him. She scanned it and let out a mocking little laugh. It's just a few lousy bucks. Sign it, Kaylin. We don't need her charity. A flicker of irritation crossed Kaylin's face, at her or at the situation I didn't know, but for her sake he didn't lash out. I stared him down. You have 1 month. If you don't pay me back in that time, it'll be 10 times the amount. He clenched his jaw. I already explained things to you. What are you still mad about? My gaze shifted between the crying Serafina and the furious Kaylin before curling into a mocking smile. With the two of you like this, do you really think you're worth my anger? Get out. Don't waste my time. Swallowing his pride, his face dark as iron, Kaylin grabbed a still glaring Serafina and stormed out. I stood in the center of the room, my heart pounding not with heartbreak, but with a fierce, liberating triumph. The first battle of my new life was won. The very next morning I found a locksmith and changed the lock. I also went to a department store and bought a small, powerful electric heater. In my previous life I had been stupid enough to burn myself to keep others warm, ending as cold ashes. This time I would be the one who was warm, safe and secure. Relying on my memory and the hard-won experience of a life cut short, I didn't waste money on prep classes. I bought second-hand study materials and created my own rigorous review schedule. The The college entrance exam had only been reinstated a few years prior, and the competition was ferocious. I didn't dare waste a single moment. This was my chance. My only chance. And I was going to seize it with both hands. The silence in my rented room was a balm. No Kaylin making demands, no factory noise, just the soft hum of my new electric heater and the turning of pages. I had carved out a small fortress of solitude, and I was its sole, dedicated guardian. My savings were meager, but with no one to leech from me, they were enough for rent, simple food, and my precious books. A few days after the confrontation, I was returning from the market with a bag of vegetables when Mr. Zhang, the old man who watched over the public phone booth near my building, called out to me. "Alara, Kaylin called for you today." Sounded a bit anxious. I offered him a genuine smile. "Thank you, Uncle Zhang, but we broke up." He must have dialed the wrong number. Before he could respond with the pity or curiosity I saw in his eyes, I gave a polite nod and hurried on. When I turned the corner to my street, I saw him. He was standing right outside my door, holding a roasted sweet potato wrapped in newspaper like a peace offering. He was tall and clean-cut, and Mr. Zhang, who had always liked him, was pouring him a cup of hot water from his thermos, the two of them chatting like old friends. He looked the picture of a decent, patient young man. I knew the rot that lay beneath. I approached, my expression blank, the groceries heavy in my arms. The moment he saw me, he rushed forward, the concern on his face so perfectly crafted it was nauseating. "Alara, why didn't you answer my calls?" "I've been worried sick." I didn't look at him, walking silently past him to my door, fumbling for my key. He trailed after me step for step. "Are you still mad?" "Alara, there's really nothing between me and Serafina. She's just a friend who has helped me a lot with my studies." I couldn't just refuse to lend her a bed. It was the chivalrous thing to do. I stopped the key halfway to the lock. I turned my head slowly, meeting his eyes. "The apartment you so chivalrously lent her," I said, my voice low and precise. "Was it one you paid for?" His face faltered, a crack in the perfect facade. I didn't think it through. I thought we didn't draw lines like that between us." A cold snort escaped me. "I'm working my hands to the bone in a factory and you're out playing the hero for other women." "Oh, I think you've been very thoughtful indeed." Kaylin's brows furrowed, his patience visibly thinning. "Alara Vance, I skipped class to come here and explain things as clearly as I can. How long are you going to keep throwing a fit?" He reached out and grabbed my arm, his grip tight, his tone laced with a familiar impatience that had once cowed me. I didn't flinch. I slowly, deliberately pried his fingers off my arm. "We are breaking up," I said, each word a shard of ice. "Leave." He didn't take me seriously. He never did. He saw my resolve as a temporary tantrum, a storm he just had to wait out. He even tried to pull me into a hug, a gesture that had once been my sanctuary. "Come on, Alara. Don't be like this. We've been through too much." In the scuffle, the small vocabulary notebook I carried everywhere slipped from my pocket. Kaylin, ever quick, snatched it up before I could react. He stared at it, his eyes scanning the densely packed English words and mathematical formulas. A slow, incredulous smirk spread across his face. "You're memorizing vocabulary? While working in the factory?" He looked up at me, a condescending light in his eyes. "Don't tell me you're actually preparing for the college entrance exam again." I snatched the notebook back from his hand. "That's none of your business." His smirk widened, curdling into a sneer. "Alara, you won't pass. Let's be realistic. The only reason you got in before was a fluke, a stroke of luck. You've been out of school for almost half a year. Do you really think the college entrance exam is something you can just decide to pass?" The expression on his face, the dismissive, mocking certainty, overlapped perfectly with the man from my previous life, the one who had called me an uneducated housewife. The ghost of that old pain lanced through me, but it was quickly cauterized by a fresh wave of fury. My voice dropped to a whisper, but it was as sharp and cold as a shard of glass. "I don't need your opinion, Kaylin." He glared at me, his jaw tight. "Fine. Have it your way. But when you're exhausted and defeated, don't come crying to me. And remember, you promised to support my repeat year. The materials fee is due soon. Don't you dare go back on your word just because you've got some foolish notion in your head." I let out a short, incredulous laugh, the sound harsh in the quiet street. I finally got the door unlocked and strode inside, shutting it firmly in his face. I heard him stand there for a moment longer before his footsteps finally retreated. Support him, I muttered to the empty room. He can support himself in his dreams. Without me funding his life, I was genuinely curious to see what the great Kalen Mercer, who had never worked a day in his life, could actually accomplish. I threw myself back into my studies with a vengeance. In my last life, even burdened by family, I'd never completely let my mind stagnate. I read newspapers, borrowed books, and tried to keep up. That foundation, combined with the burning focus of someone who knew what it was to lose everything, made picking up the textbooks less difficult than I'd feared. My days fell into a grueling but fulfilling rhythm. I woke at 5 a.m., my mind clear, and dove into mathematics. I slept at 11 p.m., my body tired but my spirit buzzing with the satisfaction of a problem solved, a passage understood. My life was no longer the kind where I opened my eyes to a child's needs and closed them in a kitchen, my world shrinking to the four walls of a home. The red crosses on my practice test papers grew fewer and fewer, replaced by confident, bold checkmarks. On my birthday, I decided to splurge. I was going to buy myself a proper cream cake. In my past life, such a luxury was a distant dream, a frivolity I always denied myself. This time I would celebrate my own existence. I walked into the best bakery in the city center, the bell on the door tinkling cheerfully. And there they were, standing before the glass display case. Kalen and Serafina. Of course. She was smiling up at him, her expression one of bashful sweetness, her hand resting lightly on his arm. I had rented my apartment specifically to be near his school for his convenience. Now the irony felt like a physical blow. Serafina spotted me first. Her eyes lit up not with warmth but with a predatory glee. She deliberately raised her voice, a tinkling, girlish sound. Kalen. This one, the one with the strawberries. So beautiful. You'll buy it for me, won't you? Kalen, utterly wrapped around her finger, rubbed her hair with a look of helpless affection. All right, little greedy guts. I'll buy it for you. Seeing that scene, it would be a lie to say I felt nothing. A cold, hollow ache settled in my chest. In my previous life at this exact time, a cream-frosted cake was a rare and expensive treat. I'd always had a sweet tooth, and since it was my birthday and Kalen had just received a small bonus from a tutoring job, I had gathered the courage to ask him for a small one. I had even taken time off from the factory, cooked a full table of his favorite dishes in my rented apartment, and waited for him to come after class. He came home late that day, empty-handed except for a single cold roasted sweet potato. Elara, he'd said, his voice full of false regret, times are tight right now. A cake isn't as worthwhile as a sweet potato. Don't you love these the most? They're both sweet. What's the difference? Even though I was crushed with disappointment, I hadn't shown it. I had even convinced myself he was right, practical and responsible, blaming myself for being wasteful and selfish. It wasn't until years later, reading his damning diary, that I learned the truth. He hadn't bought me a cake because he had no money left. He had spent his entire bonus on an elaborate cake, a new dress, and a tube of fashionable lipstick for Serafina Dove's birthday, which happened to fall on the very same day. For me, there had only been a cheap, cold sweet potato from a roadside vendor. Sweet potatoes were cheap, and in his eyes so was I. But my worth wasn't for him to decide. Not anymore. It was just a cake. If I wanted one, I could buy it myself. I walked right up to the counter, ignoring them completely, and pointed to the most extravagant cake in the shop. A two-tiered confection covered in whipped cream rosettes and fresh fruit. I'll take that one, please. Kalen finally noticed me. A flicker of something, guilt? Annoyance? Crossed his face before it settled into a look of pleased surprise. Elara, you've come around? I knew you'd see sense. I glanced at him as if he were a stranger asking for the time, then turned back to the cashier, pulling out my wallet. He stepped closer, his voice low. Who are you buying the cake for? When I didn't answer, he persisted, a note of accusation creeping in. Not long ago I told you the food at the repeat year class was terrible and you didn't care. Now you're wasting money on a cake. I let out a short, disbelieving laugh. And yet here you are buying a cake yourself. Looks like you're doing just fine. He coughed, awkwardly shuffling his feet. It's Serafina's birthday. What's wrong with me buying a cake for the birthday girl? I looked from his flustered face to Serafina's smug one and gave a cold, sharp smile. Today is my birthday too. Kalen froze, his grip on the cake box he was holding loosening slightly. What? Why didn't you tell me earlier? I took my change from the cashier and picked up my own much larger cake box. I celebrate my own birthday now. It's not like I haven't told you before. I had many times. He had just never listened. Serafina, still clinging to Kalen's arm, spoke in a syrupy tone. Sister, what a coincidence. Why don't we celebrate together? It would be so much fun. I looked her up and down, my smile not reaching my eyes. Do I look that shameless to you? Spending time with people of such questionable character. Her eyes instantly welled up with tears, her lower lip trembling. Sister, even if you don't like me, you don't have to slander me like this. Seeing her cry, Kalen immediately jumped to her defense, his voice hardening. Serafina is a good girl. Your mind is truly filthy, Elara. I curved my lips into a faint, knowing smile. A good girl wouldn't sleep in the same bed as a man who already has a girlfriend. I didn't shout. I didn't need to. My voice was just loud enough, just clear enough for the other customers and the staff to hear. Heads turned. Eyes, curious and judgmental, landed on Kalen and Serafina. Their faces instantly lost all color, blotching with red and white patches of humiliation. Kalen scrambled to explain to the suddenly hostile air. She's making things up. Don't listen to her. I gave a short, dismissive huff and strode toward the door with my cake. But Kalen, desperate to regain control, snatched the box from my hands. Elara, are you even listening to me? I stared past him, through him as if he were nothing but air. The cashier, thinking Kalen intended to pay for my cake as well, politely announced the price. That will be 35 yuan, sir. Kalen's face went slack. His lips, pressed into a tight line, twitched. 35? Why is it so expensive? The cashier, a young woman, replied politely but firmly. Sir, this cake is made with imported cream and the fruit is the freshest available. It's our premium product. Kalen hesitated. Before, with me covering all his tuition, living expenses and materials fees, he never had to worry about money. He could play the generous benefactor to Serafina. But now, without my financial backing, that little bonus of his was stretched thin. The people waiting in line behind us grew impatient, muttering for him to hurry up. Serafina tugged at his arm, her voice a whining plea. Kalen, I really want that one. Hurry up and pay. Once she spoke, Kalen was trapped. His pride was on the line. Gritting his teeth, his face a mask of strained nonchalance, he pulled out his wallet and paid for her cake. I couldn't help but smile. I picked up my own, even more expensive cake, my heart light. I was curious to see how long he could keep up this act of being a big spender without my hard-earned wages funding his charade. I walked out of the bakery, the bell tinkling behind me, the weight of the cake box in my hands feeling not like a burden but like a trophy. The sweet, buttery scent of the cake filled my small room that evening as I ate a slice, savoring every mouthful. It was more than a dessert. It was a testament to my freedom, a declaration that I was worth every sweet, delicious bite. The sweet taste of victory from the bakery encounter lingered for days, fueling my studies with a renewed sense of purpose. The cake had been a symbol and I had claimed it for myself. My life settled into a deep, focused rhythm. Wake, study, eat, study, sleep. The world outside my room, the world of Kalen and Serafina and factory gossip, faded into a distant, irrelevant hum. It was a shock, then, when a knock came at my door one afternoon, interrupting a particularly complex physics problem. I opened it to find a middle-aged man in a modest Mao suit, his face etched with lines of worry and a faint air of intellectual authority. I recognized him instantly, Mr. Gao, Kalen's homeroom teacher. Miss Vance, he began, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. I am Mr. Gao from the repeat year program at the high school. May I speak with you for a moment? A cold dread, entirely for Kalen's sake, washed over me. I had no desire to be dragged back into his drama. But politeness and a sliver of morbid curiosity won out. I invited him in. He sat awkwardly on the edge of my single chair, his eyes scanning the room. The books piled on the floor, the formulas scrawled on scraps of paper taped to the wall, the electric heater glowing in the corner. It was not the room of a factory girl pining for her boyfriend. I'll come straight to the point, he said, clasping his hands. It's about Kalen. Without your supervision, his performance has plummeted. He has already skipped 3 consecutive mock tests. His scores, when he does deign to take them, are disastrous. I remained silent, my face a mask of polite indifference. Mr. Gao leaned forward, his voice dropping to a confidential tone. You're his cousin, right? I have to tell you, this kid has been dating lately. He's even skipped classes just to buy his girlfriend lipstick. At this rate, it's no good. He's the strongest student in the entire repeat year class, the one I've been focusing on. But if this keeps up, forget Tsinghua University. He won't even make it into a technical school here in the city. The misconception was so profound it was almost funny. I looked at this well-meaning, distressed teacher and decided to shatter his illusion. I needed to sever this last official tie. You're mistaken, Mr. Gao, I said calmly. I'm not his cousin. He frowned, confused. But that's how he introduced you to me before. He said you were a cousin supporting him out of family duty. I let out a cold, mirthless laugh. I didn't correct him at the time because I was afraid you'd find the truth ridiculous. I met his gaze squarely. I'm his ex-girlfriend. Mr. Gao froze. His mouth opened then closed. A deep flush of embarrassment crept up his neck. I see. He looked down at his hands, the picture of a man whose entire understanding of a situation had just been upended. Kalen always seemed like such a good student, he murmured, more to himself than to me. I shrugged, a gesture of supreme detachment. You can't judge people by appearances. You're a responsible teacher, Mr. Gao. But everyone has their own fate. Whether he gets into college or what kind of life he leads afterward, that's his choice. The teacher sighed, a long, weary sound that seemed to carry the weight of all his disappointed students. After a pause, he said, It's a pity. The girl he's dating is also in my class. She's pretty but definitely not the well-behaved type. I've tried to talk sense into her several times, but she refuses to break up. How did a boy like Kalen end up with her? I forced a small, tight smile. Yeah, I echoed, my voice flat. How did he end up with her? Sometimes good advice can't save someone determined to ruin themselves. Mr. Gao kept sighing, the sound filling the small room. Once he knew the truth, he didn't linger. But as he stood to leave, he turned a final, practical concern on his face. So, who is going to pay Kalen's materials fee? He's the only one in the class who hasn't paid and the school's pressing for it. I asked him and he said you'd cover it. I really don't know what else to do. I gave him a look of pure, unadulterated puzzlement. And why exactly should I be the one to pay for him? Mr. Gao opened his mouth, found no words and finally just shook his head, muttering apologies as he let himself out. The door clicked shut and the silence that returned felt cleaner, more absolute than before. The last institutional thread connecting me to Kalen Mercer had been cut. A month of peaceful study passed. The seasons began their slow turn, the bitter cold giving way to a tentative spring warmth. I was deep in a history text when another knock came, this one sharper, more insistent. I knew who it was before I opened the door. Kalen stood there, but the carefully cultivated image of the scholar was gone. He looked harried, his hair messy, a sheen of sweat on his brow. The moment he saw me, the demand came, devoid of any greeting. Elara Vance, you quit your job at the factory. I kept my hands in the pockets of my trousers, leaning against the door frame. Do I need to report my employment status to you? His tone was thick with self-righteous indignation. You promised to cover my repeat year expenses. If you've quit, where's the income to keep your word? My materials fee has been overdue for months. Are you trying to embarrass me on purpose? He practically spat the last word. Shameless. If there was ever a word made for someone, it was for him. I looked at him, this boy I had once loved, and felt nothing but a distant, academic pity. Kalen, I said, my voice dangerously calm. I agreed to support your repeat year because I wanted a future with you. But you cheated on me. So why, in the name of all that is logical, should I keep giving you money? The word cheated made him bristle like a cat doused with water. He instantly raised his voice, a sure sign of a weak argument. Elara, Serafina and I are just friends. Stop making a scene. As if shouting louder makes someone right, I observed, my voice sharp as crushed ice. I never said who it was. You're the one rushing to announce her name. Color drained from his face, then returned in ugly, blotchy patches. Sometimes I really didn't understand men like him. They coveted the excitement of a new love but still clung to the security of the old. They refused to let go of either. His voice softened abruptly, taking on a wheedling tone. What ex? We never broke up. Who told you that? We're not even married. What right do you have to tie me down? I smirked. And who told you that we're still together? He finally heard the absolute finality in my tone. He stared at me blankly, his bravado crumbling to reveal a core of genuine confusion and panic. You really want to break up with me? He asked, and for the first time I saw a flicker of unease, of real fear in his eyes. I didn't hesitate. Let's break up. You don't have me in your heart anymore, and I feel filthy just being near you. I moved to close the door, but he shot his hand out, grabbing the frame in a panic. No, that's not true. I do have you in my heart. The man who had just been shouting at me was now begging, his voice cracking. It was a pathetic, desperate performance. We've known each other for over 10 years. How can you just say it's over? Didn't you say you'd love me forever? Liar. I sighed, a sound of profound exhaustion. I'm just tired, Kaylin. You're the one who made us like this. And besides, I added, my gaze piercing, if you won't break up with me, then what exactly is Serafina Dove to you? I may despise you now, but I still know enough to give my whole heart to just one person. It seems you can't manage even that. He lowered his head, defeated. After a long moment he muttered, the money I owe you, I'll pay it back. The door lock turned as I stepped inside, shutting the door on him, on his drama, on our shared past. I didn't look back. After that final talk he came to see me a few more times. It was as if he'd suddenly learned to behave, bringing me stale pastries and second-hand study materials he thought would win me back. I accepted them without a word and later gave them to the stray cats that roamed the alley or handed them to a homeless man who slept near the market. After a few tries, when he saw his gestures had no effect, not even anger, he stopped coming altogether. As the weather warmed, I bought myself a new dress, a simple sky blue cotton one. It wasn't expensive, but it was mine, bought with my own money for my own pleasure. The pages on the calendar above my desk grew fewer and fewer. My initial frantic excitement slowly shifted into a calm, steady acceptance. I didn't have the arrogant confidence of youth anymore. I knew the odds were steep. But you only get one lifetime, and I'd already died once. What was there left to be afraid of? With that quiet, unshakable mindset, I gathered my pencils and my resolve, and stepped once more into the college entrance exam hall. The room was silent, thick with tension and the smell of nervous sweat. But when I looked down at the test paper, the words didn't swim before my eyes. They danced like musical notes I had practiced for a lifetime. My heart felt lighter and lighter with each question I answered. The exam went more smoothly than I had ever dared to hope. But the moment I walked out of the hall, my mind still buzzing with formulas and essay structures, I ran straight into them. Kaylin and Serafina. The universe, it seemed, had a cruel sense of humor. Enemies really do meet on a narrow road. Serafina didn't bother hiding anymore. She laced her fingers tightly with Kaylin's right in front of me, a blatant, possessive claim. What a coincidence, running into you again, she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. Kaylin's gaze flickered with a hint of discomfort before he masked it. How did you do? He asked, his tone condescending. The questions were tricky this year. But don't feel bad. If you need another year, I don't mind helping you. He was about to say more, probably some empty promise, when Serafina pinched his arm hard. He flinched and fell silent. I resisted the urge to roll my eyes. I heard you failed most of your mock exams before the test, I said, my voice flat. Instead of worrying about me, maybe you should worry about yourself. Serafina's eyes curved into malicious little crescents as she smiled. Kaylin was just being kind, trying to comfort you because you've known each other so long. If you don't appreciate it, then there's nothing more we can do. Kaylin seemed to want to speak to me again, to salvage some shred of his dignity, but a sharp look from Serafina silenced him. He closed his mouth, a puppet on a string. I, however, had stopped caring long ago. I walked away from them not with anger but with a profound sense of release. They were already part of a past life, ghosts I had finally laid to rest. My future, whatever it held, was mine alone. The weeks following the exam were a strange, suspended animation. The frantic pressure was gone, leaving a void filled with a quiet, nervous anticipation. I kept myself busy, taking on small mending jobs for neighbors to replenish my savings, but my mind was always elsewhere, flying towards a mailbox hundreds of miles away in Beijing. Then one day in late summer, when the osmanthus trees in the courtyard began to spill their sweet, intoxicating fragrance into the air, it came. A thin, official-looking envelope, bearing the return address of Tsinghua University. My hands trembled so violently I could barely tear it open. There was a single sheet of paper, but it carried the weight of 2 lifetimes of hope. I had been accepted into the School of Economics and Management. Tears I didn't know I had been holding back streamed down my face, silent and cathartic. I didn't sob, I simply stood there in the dusty courtyard, clutching that piece of paper as if it were a lifeline, which in a way it was. It was the proof that my rebellion had been worth it, that my stolen future had been returned to me. I ran to the public phone booth, my feet barely touching the ground. Uncle Zhang. Uncle Zhang. The old man looked up from his newspaper, his eyes crinkling into a slit as he saw my tear-streaked, beaming face. Alara? What is it, child? I got in. I practically shouted, waving the letter. Tsinghua University. I'm going to Beijing. His face broke into a wide, genuine grin. He came out from behind his booth and clapped me on the shoulder, a rare gesture of affection. I knew it. I knew you had it in you. Such a fine, clever young woman. You've really made something of yourself. He laughed, a dry, raspy sound, and I laughed with him, the joy bubbling up uncontrollably. That night I cooked a feast. I bought a whole fish, stir-fried pork with peppers, and made a huge pot of egg drop soup. I invited Uncle Zhang to my room, the first and only guest I would ever entertain there. We ate at my small table, the admission letter placed proudly in the center like a holy relic. In the past I had been so afraid of solitude, so desperate to tie Kaylin to me so I wouldn't be alone. Now even if the only person I could share my good news with was the kind old man from the phone booth, I felt a fullness and contentment I had never known. My life was my own and it was enough. Toward the end of the meal, Uncle Zhang grew quiet. He pulled a thick, crumpled envelope from the inside pocket of his jacket. Almost forgot about this, he said, pushing it across the table towards me. Kaylin came by today. But he didn't go in to see you, just gave me this and left. Said to make sure you got it. The name sent a jolt through me, a remnant of old emotions. I nodded, my joy momentarily dimmed. I picked up the envelope. It was heavy. I pulled out the contents to find a neat stack of bills, more money than I had ever seen at one time. It was easily twice the amount I had ever spent on him. With this sum, I wouldn't have to worry about my first year's tuition or living expenses. A huge financial weight lifted from my shoulders. The old man, seeing me go quiet, spoke cautiously. When he came by today, he didn't look well, Alara. Then, I heard he didn't do well on the exam. I had already expected as much, so I felt nothing. A quiet acknowledgement, that was all. His adoptive father's been seriously ill lately, Uncle Zhang continued, his voice low. After being discharged from the hospital, he couldn't even recognize people anymore. Kept wandering off. I don't think Kaylin will be going to college anytime soon. He'll have to stay and care for the old man. I tucked the envelope away, the money feeling like both a repayment and a severance package. I gave a faint, non-committal hum. Everyone has their own path to walk, Uncle Zhang. I didn't want to talk about Kaylin anymore. His path was his own to tread. I had a train to catch. A week later, I ended the lease on my apartment, packed my few belongings into a single suitcase along with my precious admission letter and Kaylin's money, and boarded the northbound train to Beijing. As the countryside sped by, transforming from the familiar greens of the south to the drier, yellower landscapes of the north, my heart stayed full of a wild, soaring excitement. This wasn't a visit. This wasn't a delivery. This was a homecoming. I finally stepped across the grand, imposing threshold of Tsinghua University, my suitcase in hand. Even after the long, sooty journey, my spirit felt clean and new. I went through the enrollment procedures, found my assigned dormitory, and claimed a wooden bed by the window. I made my bed with the new sheets I had bought, my movements reverent. My roommates, 3 bright-eyed girls from other provinces, laughed at how wide-eyed and amazed I seemed by everything. The grand libraries, the tree-lined paths, the very air which seemed to crackle with intellectual energy. You act like you've never seen a university before, one of them, a cheerful girl named May, teased. I only smiled, a secret, knowing smile. It feels like a dream, I said, which was the truest thing I could say. In my previous life around this same time, I had been to Tsinghua University once before. I had taken the chance to deliver Kalen's luggage after he had, so brilliantly, passed. That day I was dressed in dull, worn clothes, carrying a burlap sack that smelled of the factory. I had lingered at the grand iron gate for a long, long time, peering through the bars like a beggar at a feast. Through that gate, it felt as if I were staring at two completely different lives, the one I was meant to have and the one I had chosen. I had asked him, my voice small and hopeful, if he could take me inside just for a quick look. He had frowned, his expression impatient. My father needs someone to take care of him. If we don't go back soon, he'll start making a fuss. So I had swallowed my longing, my shame, and hurried away, my dream receding behind me with every step. But now I didn't need his permission. I didn't need to be anyone's guest. I had walked in openly, under my own name, with my own power. This time, my goal wasn't just to fill the regret of my past life. It was to build a foundation for a future I could barely have imagined before. Most of my roommates and classmates were top talents from their provinces, many from well-off intellectual families. Once I had adapted to campus life, I began to listen, to learn from them. I heard whispers of something new, something daring, securities trading. The stock market, I learned, was turbulent that year, a wild, unregulated frontier. Volatility, I realized, often meant opportunity. Using the small nest egg from Kalen's repayment and the snippets of economic knowledge I was rapidly acquiring in my classes, I took a calculated risk. I remembered from my previous life vague news reports about certain stocks, about companies that would boom and bust. It was hazy, unreliable knowledge, but combined with my newfound understanding and a gut instinct honed by a life of hard choices, it was enough. I started small, my heart pounding with every transaction. The market was a roller coaster, but I found I had a stomach for it. The fear of losing a little money was nothing compared to the fear of losing my entire life again. My reactions were quick, my decisions sharp. Within a few months, my initial investment had grown substantially. The word spread quietly through the department. The quiet, intense girl from the south had a knack for the market. Even the stern-faced professor who had initially dismissed my background now looked at me with a measure of respect. "Miss Vance," he said one day after class, "you have sharp market instincts. You're a woman as capable as any man on the trading floor." The praise was backhanded, but I took it. I split my earnings into 3 parts. One for savings, one to reinvest, and one to start planning for a small business of my own. My plans for the future, once a single desperate point of light, get into university, were now expanding, becoming clearer and more ambitious. I wouldn't just be a top student. I would be a top professional, a top-tier entrepreneur. I would be untouchable. While my life was ascending, spiraling upwards into a realm of possibility, Kalen's was spiraling down into the mire of his own poor choices. We'd had no contact, and I preferred it that way. But gossip, especially among students from the same region, travels fast. He had somehow scraped together the funds to attend a low-tier technical secondary school in Beijing, a pale shadow of the future he had once dreamed of. Beijing had many schools, but a married student was a rarity, a spectacle. The story, relayed to me with wide eyes by my roommate May, was that his wife, had shown up at his classroom. Serafina Dove, no longer the delicate flower, had stormed into his school, dragged him all the way to the playground in front of everyone, and screamed for money. "You promised to buy me a gold necklace," she had shrieked, her voice echoing across the campus. "I've been waiting back home for 2 months and you still haven't sent it. Do you have someone else out here?" My roommate reenacted the scene with dramatic flair. "That girl was fierce. Slapped him right across the face, split his lip. Then she asked where his father was and he couldn't answer. She pressed him until he just skipped class and ran off." I raised an eyebrow, a cold irony settling in my chest. It seemed Kalen had tried to replicate with Serafina the same life he had forced on me. Him pursuing his ambitions in the city, while his woman stayed behind to care for his ailing father. May took a sip of water, her eyes alight with the gossip. "And then, get this, I heard from a friend at that school, his dad had drowned in a lake back home. Been dead for 2 months. His wife had kept it from him the whole time." I couldn't help the pang of sorrow, not for Kalen but for the old man. He had been a kind soul. But thanks to Kalen's selfishness, he hadn't even had peace in his final years. The old man was pitiful. But Kalen had brought this all on himself. He had chosen her. The path of deception and convenience he had chosen was his own. Who else could he possibly blame? The rhythm of university life was a symphony to my soul. Every lecture, every book, every spirited debate with my classmates was a note in a song of liberation. I was no longer just Alara Vance, the orphan, the factory girl, the betrayed girlfriend. I was Alara Vance, Tsinghua student. The identity fit me like a well-tailored glove. My foray into the stock market had given me not just capital but a fierce reputation. I was cautious with my newfound notoriety, knowing that in this new era, fortunes could be made and broken on a whim, and a woman's success could attract as much envy as admiration. I kept my head down in class, but my mind was constantly working, analyzing economic reports and planning my next move. The winter break of my first year arrived, bringing with it a biting cold that seeped into the bones of the city. I felt no particular pull to return to my provincial town, a place that held only ghosts and grievances. But there was one place I needed to visit: the welfare home. I had saved a small amount of money from my trading and I wanted to donate it, to perhaps buy the children new blankets or books. It was a gesture of closure and of hope. Director Lee, a woman whose hair had gone fully gray since I last saw her, was visibly moved when I handed her the envelope. "Elara," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "we always knew you were special. To think of the children now after all you've achieved, it's a true blessing." She insisted I stay for tea and we sat in her small, overheated office, the scent of old paper and disinfectant filling the air. We spoke of mundane things at first, but the conversation inevitably turned to the other children from our year. Her face grew shadowed. "You both grew up here," she said, a deep disappointment etched into her features. "How did he end up like this?" She didn't need to say his name. We both knew. She then shared the updates, the gossip that had trickled back from our hometown. After Serafina's explosive visit to his school, Kalen had been utterly humiliated. He dropped out soon after and returned home. Everyone assumed it was to arrange his adoptive father's funeral. But instead, Director Lee said, her tone laced with disgust, he fought with that girl over the old man's house. Can you imagine? The old man worked himself to the bone raising him, and yet Kalen's behavior left people chilled. After this, who would dare adopt from a welfare home again? She sighed, a sound of profound weariness. He's poisoned the well for others. I felt a cold satisfaction. This was the true Kalen Mercer, stripped of his academic pretensions and charming lies. So, who ended up with the house? I asked, though I could already guess. The director gave a short, mocking laugh. That Dove girl used the child she was carrying to threaten him. Said she'd get rid of it if he didn't sign the house over to her. So he did. And then, in the middle of the night, she sold the house, pocketed the money, and disappeared. And she did, in fact, get rid of the baby. I raised my brows, feeling a twisted sense of justice. In her own ruthless way, Serafina had done what I never could. She had given Kalen a taste of his own medicine. Director Lee shook her head, looking at me with a mixture of pity and pride. Back then you and he were so close. You even took the college entrance exam twice for him. I thought you two would last, but he couldn't handle his own good fortune. Still, a man like that isn't worthy of you. You're doing very well now. If they try to contact you..." She trailed off, a protective note in her voice. I shook my head, a small, hard smile on my lips. "Actually, Kalen has written me several letters over the past couple of years. He said he misses me. Said I'm the one who really suits him. Admitted he was blind before." Director Lee's eyes widened. "And?" I didn't reply to a single one. Threw them all straight into the trash. The words were final, absolute. After leaving the welfare home, the past felt like a weight I had finally, fully shrugged off. I went to the newly opened supermarket, a symbol of the city's slow modernization, to buy a small cake. The kind of indulgence I once couldn't bear to spend money on was now a simple, everyday pleasure. As usual, I chose the most expensive one, a small, glossy chocolate torte. But at the checkout, fate, or perhaps just the cruel mathematics of a small town, had one last card to play. The boy bagging groceries was Kalen. He wore a yellowed, patched cotton jacket, his shoulders slumped. His face was unshaven, and the handsome features I remembered were blurred by hardship and a lack of care. The only thing he'd ever had going for him, his looks, were long gone. I, on the other hand, wore a stylish woolen camel coat and leather boots I had bought in Beijing. The contrast between us was so stark it was almost theatrical. He didn't recognize me until I spoke, my voice calm and devoid of the emotion he probably expected. Kalen. His head snapped up. For a second, there was nothing in his eyes but the dullness of manual labor. Then recognition dawned, followed by a flicker of wild, desperate hope. He stepped in front of me, blocking my path to the door. Alara? You came back. Did you come back to find me? I frowned, the stale scent of sweat and despair coming off him in waves. I covered my nose instinctively. Don't flatter yourself. Stay away from me. He froze, then stepped back awkwardly, his face flushing with a mixture of shame and hurt. Sorry, I've just been so busy with work. I haven't had time to take care of myself. I had no interest in this pathetic performance. I paid for my cake and moved to walk around him, my heels clicking decisively on the tiled floor. But he suddenly called out, his voice cracking, loud enough for other shoppers to turn and stare. Alara Vance, I regret it. I stopped, but I didn't turn around. I regret it, he repeated, his voice trembling, almost breaking into sobs. I picked the wrong person back then. You're my real love. You have to believe me. After all these years together, you really won't take me back. Now he knew how to cry. Where was this performance when it mattered? When I was the one crying silent tears over a cold sweet potato. When I was the one begging for a shred of attention. Slowly I turned to face him. The other shoppers were staring, their whispers a soft hiss in the air. I looked at him, this broken man in his stained jacket, his face streaked with tears, and I felt nothing. Not anger, not pity. Nothing. He saw my expression and his hope crumbled. His tears fell harder, his shoulders shaking with genuine self-pitying sobs. I smiled then, a faint, cold and utterly final smile. No, I said, my voice clear and carrying in the sudden quiet of the supermarket. I don't regret leaving you. In fact, I think it's the best decision I've ever made in my life. His sobs hitched. He looked utterly destroyed. There's no medicine for regret, Kalen, I continued, my gaze holding his. So, I hope I'll always live in a way that I'll never need it. I turned my back on him for the last time and walked out of the supermarket into the crisp winter air. The bell on the door jingled behind me, a sound of dismissal. I didn't look back. I knew with a certainty that settled deep in my bones that I would never see him again. The ghost was finally laid to rest. The past was truly, completely over. The encounter with Kalen at the supermarket was the final, definitive full stop on the first volume of my life. Returning to Beijing after the winter break felt like coming home in the truest sense. The city, with its bustling, impersonal energy, was my sanctuary. Here I was not defined by my past, but by my present actions and future potential. My initial success in the stock market had been a combination of hazy memory, instinct, and luck. Now I was determined to build my success on a foundation of granite. I became a voracious learner, spending hours in the library beyond my required coursework, devouring books on economic theory, market analysis, and the nascent field of business management. My finance professor, initially merely respectful of my instincts, now took a genuine interest in my analytical mind, often discussing complex market trends with me after class. The substantial profit I had made became the seed capital for something more concrete. With the portion of my earnings I had allocated for starting a business, I didn't dream of building an empire overnight. I started small, practically. I noticed a gap in the market around the university. Students, increasingly fashion-conscious but short on funds, had limited options. The state-run stores offered drab, utilitarian clothing, while the few emerging private vendors were expensive. I used my remaining connections from the garment factory, not as a worker but as a client. I placed a small, carefully calculated order for stylish but simple blouses and trousers, designs I had sketched out myself based on what I saw in magazines from Hong Kong. I rented a tiny stall in a bustling market near the university, not with the intention of manning it myself, but as a proof of concept. I hired 2 enterprising junior students, paying them a commission on sales. They were eager, personable, and understood our customer base perfectly. The clothes, priced just right between affordability and style, sold out in a week. I reinvested every yuan, placed a larger order, and found 2 more students to run a second stall in a different district. It wasn't a stock market windfall, but it was something more satisfying. A steady, growing stream of income that I had built from the ground up. I was no longer just a speculator. I was an entrepreneur. The feeling of seeing my designs, my business plan translate into tangible success was a drug more potent than any trading profit. My reputation on campus evolved. I was no longer just the lucky girl from the South who played with stocks. I was Alara Vance, the sharp-minded business student who ran a successful clothing venture on the side. I attracted attention, some admiring, some envious. A few male classmates, sons of party officials or factory directors, began to show interest, seeing in me not just a pretty face, but a formidable, intelligent partner. I entertained their conversations, their offers to study together, with a polite detachment. I was friendly, but I built a wall around my heart that was higher and stronger than the one around Tsinghua itself. Romance was a distraction, a vulnerability I could not afford. I had seen where putting a man at the center of my universe led. This time I was the sun and my ambitions were the planets in orbit. One afternoon I was in the library, buried in a text on macroeconomic policy, when a shadow fell over my table. I looked up to see Liam Chin, the son of a well-connected official in the Ministry of Commerce. He was handsome, confident, and known for his sharp intellect. "Elara," he said, his voice low so as not to disturb the silence. "I've been looking for you. A few of us are putting together a study group for the International Economics midterm. We thought you might want to join. Your insights on the last case study were impressive." It was a genuine offer and a flattering one. The few of us were the top tier of our class. This was an invitation into an inner circle. I smiled, a careful, measured expression. "Thank you, Liam. That's very kind. But I have a prior commitment with my business partners to go over our inventory." It was a half-truth, a polite refusal. He looked surprised, then intrigued. "No one refused, Liam Chin. The clothing stalls? I've heard. It's quite an undertaking for a student. You're full of surprises, Alara Vance." "One has to be," I replied, my gaze steady. "We can't all rely on family connections." It was a bold, almost rude thing to say, but I said it with a slight smile, taking the sting out of it. I needed him and men like him to understand that I was not a prize to be won, but a potential ally to be respected. He laughed, a short, surprised sound. "No," he agreed, his eyes appraising me with new interest. "I suppose we can't. Well, the offer stands if you change your mind." I nodded and he moved away. I watched him go, not with the flutter of a schoolgirl's heart, but with the cool calculation of a strategist. Connections were currency, and Liam Chin was a high-denomination note. But I would not spend my own integrity to acquire him. I would make myself valuable enough that he would seek a partnership on my terms. This was the new rhythm of my life, a symphony of academia and commerce. My days were a whirlwind of lectures, library sessions, meetings with my student vendors, and trips to the fabric market. I was constantly tired, but it was a fulfilling exhaustion, so different from the soul-crushing fatigue of the factory. This was the fatigue of creation, of building. I received a letter from Director Lee during this time. She wrote that the welfare home had used my donation to buy new winter coats for all the children. She enclosed a photograph. 24 small, smiling faces bundled in bright blue jackets. I pinned that photo to the wall above my desk. It was a more powerful motivator than any grade or profit margin. It was a reminder of where I came from and proof that I could change the trajectory of not just my own life but others as well. One of my roommates, May, plopped down on my bed one evening as I was tallying the week's sales. "You're a machine, Alara," she said, shaking her head in admiration. "Classes, this business. Don't you ever want to just relax? Go to a dance. There's a boy in the physics department who asks about you all the time." I looked up from my ledger, my pen still in my hand. "I am relaxing," I said, and I meant it. The scratch of pen on paper, the neat columns of numbers that represented my independence. This was my peace. "And tell the boy in the physics department that if he has a business proposition, I'd be happy to hear it." May laughed, a bright, incredulous sound. "You're impossible." But I wasn't. I was just finally, completely possible on my own terms. The factory girl was gone, erased. The betrayed woman was a memory, a lesson learned. In her place was Alara Vance, student, entrepreneur, and architect of her own fortune. And her work had only just begun. The following year passed in a blur of purposeful activity. My small clothing business, which I'd christened New Threads, steadily grew. I expanded from 2 stalls to 4, hiring more students and carefully managing the supply chain. The profits, while not astronomical, provided a financial security I had never known, allowing me to focus on my studies without the gnawing worry of tuition. My calculated politeness with Liam Chin evolved into a strategic alliance. We never dated, but we became a formidable study team. He provided access to resources and insider knowledge of policy shifts. I provided a ground-level understanding of market mechanics and a work ethic that matched his own ambition. We were peers, and the respect between us was real. It was a new kind of relationship for me, one built on mutual benefit and intellectual respect, not emotional dependency. In my third year, a golden opportunity presented itself. The university announced a business innovation competition with a significant cash prize and, more importantly, the mentorship of a panel of influential economists and ministry officials. The challenge was to create a viable business plan for a post-command economy. Most entrants proposed variations on private factories or import-export ventures. I decided to think differently. Drawing on my experience with new threads and my observations of the city's changing landscape, I crafted a proposal for a centralized private employment agency. I argued that as state-assigned jobs dwindled, both emerging private enterprises and skilled workers would be lost without a mechanism to find each other. My plan detailed a service that would vet candidates, match skills with needs, and take a small commission from successful placements. It was a bridge between the old system and the new. Liam read my draft, his expression unreadable. It's Baudelaire. And risky. You're essentially proposing to monetize the allocation of human labor. Some on the panel will see it as ideologically questionable. I'm proposing a solution to an inefficiency that will only grow, I countered, my voice calm. The ideology will have to catch up with the reality. He was silent for a long moment, then a slow smile spread across his face. It's brilliant. And you're right. Let them be questioned. The day of the presentation, I stood before the panel of stern-faced older men, my heart a steady drumbeat of resolve, not fear. I wore a suit I had tailored from my own stall's inventory, a simple, sharp lines that commanded respect. I laid out my plan, my voice clear, my arguments backed by the data I had painstakingly gathered from my own business and market surveys. I spoke of productivity, of wasted potential, of the need for a fluid labor market to fuel growth. The questions were sharp, probing for weakness. One official, a man with a perpetually furrowed brow, leaned forward. Miss Vance, your model is predicated on the continued decline of state-owned enterprises. Are you not, in effect, betting against the state? I met his gaze without flinching. I am betting on the ingenuity and ambition of the Chinese people, I replied. The state has opened the door for private enterprise. My proposal is simply a service to help people walk through it more efficiently. A stronger private sector, properly managed, strengthens the nation as a whole. There was a long silence. I couldn't read their faces. I thanked them and walked out, my palms damp but my head high. Weeks later, the results were announced. I had won. The news spread across the department like wildfire. Elara Vance, the orphan from the South, had won the most prestigious business competition at Tsinghua. The cash prize was substantial, but the real prize was the mentorship. I was now in the orbit of men who shaped economic policy. The victory party was held at a restaurant I could never have afforded on my own. Liam clinked his glass with mine. I told you it was brilliant, he said, his eyes holding a genuine admiration that had nothing to do with romance. You've just changed the game for yourself. He was right. The win was a catalyst. The mentorship opened doors I hadn't even known existed. I was invited to closed-door seminars, introduced to bankers, and asked for my opinion on market trends. My new threads business, once a side project, was now seen as a successful case study. I used the competition prize money to formalize it, renting a small office and hiring a full-time manager, freeing me to think bigger. It was during one of these seminars that I saw him. Not Kalen. The thought of him was now like remembering a character from a sad book, but another ghost from my past life. I was discussing the potential for consumer credit with a portly bank manager when my eyes swept across the room and landed on a man hovering near the refreshments table. He was older, dressed in a cheap, ill-fitting suit, nervously holding a cup of tea. It was Mr. Wang, the floor manager from the Xiangjiang garment factory. Our eyes met. His widened in shock, then confusion, then a dawning, almost comical recognition. He hurried over, bowing slightly, his former authority completely gone. Miss Vance? Lara? Is it really you? Mr. Wong, I said, my voice coolly polite. What a surprise. I heard rumors you were at Tsinghua, but I didn't believe. He stammered, his eyes taking in my tailored suit, the confident way I held myself, the respectful attention of the bank manager beside me. You've come so far. The factory was a valuable lesson in efficiency, I said, a slight smile touching my lips. It taught me what I didn't want my life to be. His face fell. He was there, I learned, to beg for a loan for the factory, which was struggling to compete with the new, agile private manufacturers. The world I had escaped was now struggling to survive in the new economy I was helping to build. The irony was rich and not lost on either of us. I am glad to see you are well, Mr. Wong, I said, ending the conversation. I turned back to the bank manager, seamlessly picking up our discussion. I felt Mr. Wong linger for a moment before slinking away. There was no schadenfreude, only a profound sense of distance. I had not just moved on, I had transcended. That night, back in my dorm room, I looked at the photo of the children in their new blue coats. I had power now. Not the fleeting power of a stock trade or a successful stall, but a different kind of power. The power of influence, of a respected voice, of a seat at the table. I had built it all myself, brick by brick, with my mind and my will. The timid factory girl who had trembled at the floor manager's voice was gone. In her place was a woman who could look a bank manager in the eye and debate economic policy, a woman whose ideas could win national competitions, a woman who was no longer defined by the men in her life, but by the life she had built for herself. The future was no longer just a dream of survival or even success. It was a canvas, and I was only just beginning to paint. Graduation day dawned bright and clear. The air at Tsinghua was thick with the scent of blooming magnolias and the palpable buzz of anticipation. Dressed in my academic regalia, the square cap feeling both strange and symbolic, I walked with my cohort toward the great hall. The sun warmed my face and I felt a serenity I had never known. This was not an end but a glorious, hard-won commencement. My name was called. Elara Vance, School of Economics and Management, with highest honors. The applause was a wave that carried me across the stage. I shook the dean's hand, accepted my diploma, and looked out at the sea of faces. I didn't see my past in the crowd, I saw my future. My roommates, my business partners, Liam Chin, my professors, they were the landscape of my new life. The photograph of the children from the welfare home was tucked into the pocket over my heart, a silent witness to how far I had come. In the whirlwind of celebrations and farewells, offers came flooding in. A position at a newly formed state investment bank. A role in a ministry think tank. An invitation from Liam Chin to join his family's burgeoning commercial enterprise. An offer that hinted at something more than professional partnership. I listened to them all, polite and grateful. But my mind was already made up. A week after graduation, I stood in my own small office, the one I had rented with the competition prize money. The sign on the door was simple, elegant: Vance Consulting. My plan was to formalize and expand the concept that had won me the competition. I would not just be an employment agency, I would be a strategic partner for the new private enterprises springing up across the country, helping them navigate the chaotic, thrilling transition from a planned to a market economy. I would help them find talent, secure funding, and develop business strategies. It was a risk. The government positions were secure, prestigious. Liam's offer was a fast track to wealth and influence. But security and a fast track were not what I had fought for. I had fought for autonomy. For the right to build something that was entirely, unequivocally mine. My first client was a nervous man who had left his state-run factory to start a workshop producing precision machine parts. He had the technical skill but no idea how to find customers or manage his finances. I spent weeks with him, organizing his operations, helping him draft contracts, and using my nascent network to find him his first major buyer. The day he secured the contract, a deal that would allow him to hire 5 more workers, he bowed to me, his eyes shining with tears of gratitude. That feeling, of being the architect of someone else's success, was more intoxicating than any stock dividend. My business grew not explosively but steadily, rooted in tangible results. I became known as the person to see if you had a bold idea but lacked the business acumen to execute it. I was a bridge, just as I had proposed in my competition entry. One afternoon about a year after graduation, I was working on a complex proposal for a client seeking foreign investment. A familiar figure appeared in my open doorway. It was Liam Chin. He leaned against the frame, smiling. The famous Alara Vance. I hear you turned down the deputy director position at the Ministry of Commerce. I heard a rumor to that effect myself, I replied, gesturing for him to come in. He sat down, his gaze taking in the modest but well-organized office, the stacks of client files, the map of China on the wall with pins marking my projects. You were always the most stubborn person I've ever met. And the smartest. He paused. My offer still stands, you know. A partnership. In every sense. I looked at him, this brilliant, ambitious man who represented a path of least resistance to a life of comfort and power. A life many would kill for. But I had already killed the part of me that would have settled for it. Liam, I said, my voice gentle but firm. You are a wonderful friend and a formidable mind. But my answer is the same. My path is here. I gestured around the room. Building this. He nodded slowly, not surprised but with a trace of genuine regret. I knew you'd say that. I just had to be sure. He stood up, extending his hand. Then let it be a business alliance. I'll be sending clients your way. They'll need your kind of clear-eyed pragmatism. I shook his hand, a true smile on my face. I would appreciate that very much. After he left, I walked to the window, looking down at the bustling Beijing street below. The city was a monument to change, to relentless forward motion. I had been reborn into its churning heart, and I had not just survived. I had thrived by its new rules. My thoughts drifted, not to Kaylin, whose fate was a closed chapter of no interest to me, but further back. To the desperate, love-starved orphan I had been, so eager to tie my destiny to a boy she thought was her savior. That girl felt like a different person, a character from a cautionary tale. I had outgrown her, not with bitterness, but with a profound understanding of my own worth. The horizon I had seen from my factory stool, the one that seemed so unattainable, was now behind me. I had crossed it, and I had discovered that the horizon was never the destination. It was merely a marker, a sign that there was always more world to see, more to build, more to become. I was Alara Vance. I was a university graduate. I was a business owner. I was a force in my own right. And my story, I knew with a deep, unshakable certainty, was only just beginning. I turned from the window, my eyes falling on the next client file waiting on my desk. I sat down, picked up my pen and began to write the next page. The end.